It's a Friday PFT OT with no PFT Live to anchor the show, at least not on NBCSN. We stepped aside for the Rugby World Cup. PFT Live on NBC Sports Radio went forward as usual. Thanks to Darren Gant, Shireen Williams, and Tom Curran for joining me for the 3-hour radio show. Some of the big highlights right now in the National Football League, and I want to start with the Thursday night game. Yeah, it was kind of a boring game, but we learned some things about the Jaguars. We learned some things about the Titans, and we're going to continue to learn more 1 week at a time as the season unfolds. Gardner Minshew II, the early darling of the NFL, getting his first career win in his first home start as the quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Everybody is praising this guy, but let's keep one thing in mind. And first of all, I think he's doing a great job. I think it's spectacular to see the Jaguars find a young quarterback who can come in and get it done after all those years of a guy not getting it done in the form of Blake Bortles. But remember, with any new quarterback, 4 to 6 weeks of game film is what defensive coordinators need to begin to figure out what the guy does. That doesn't mean all of a sudden he's going to fall off a cliff. What it means is he will be facing more elaborate game plans that are designed specifically to address what he does well and to force him toward the things that maybe he doesn't do quite so well. Efforts to confuse him with different looks and whatnot to make him play like the rookie that he is. And there's a looming dilemma out there for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And at some point, I would expect Doug Marrone, the coach of the team, to mention the 100% rule as it relates to starting quarterback Nick Foles, because Foles has a broken collarbone. And if Gardner Minshew II continues to play at a high level, they're going to give that collarbone a little extra time to heal. And Foles won't play until he is 100%. And when will he be 100%? At some point after he's truly 100% and Gardner Minshew II cools off. Until then, look for Foles to continue to be the guy he's always been. He's not going to clamor to play. He's not going to cause problems. He's not going to be passive-aggressive. He's going to support whoever is playing and do everything he can to keep himself ready to go. The difference is, because now Nick Foles is the Carson Wentz and Gardner Minshew is the Nick Foles, but Nick Foles doesn't have the body of work in Jacksonville that Wentz had in Philadelphia. It was easier to flip back to Carson Wentz once Wentz was healthy. It's going to be harder to put Foles back out on the field because each passing week we're seeing more and more from Gardner Minshew II, assuming he continues to play well. If he doesn't play well, it's a no-brainer. As soon as Foles is healthy, he's back on the field. So keep an eye on how that develops, because we get into mid to late November, Nick Foles' collarbone gets closer and closer to 100%. Maybe, just maybe, they continue to ride the hot hand by saying we're protecting Nick Foles against a possible re-break of that injured collarbone. The Tennessee Titans are eventually going to have some decisions to make at the quarterback position, maybe not during the season, maybe after the season, or most definitely at some point before free agency in 2020, because Marcus Mariota is in the last year of his rookie deal. And in the first half of last night's game, he did not look good at all. 6 of 16. At one point, Ryan Tannehill had his helmet on. It prompted reporters to ask Coach Mike Vrabel after the game, how close was Tannehill to being put into the game? Vrabel said not very. He just simply was listening to the play calls that way. Okay? Well, I know this. When Marcus Mariota came out in the third quarter and all of a sudden was like a guy who'd been shocked into consciousness, I couldn't help but wonder, as he was driving the team down the field on that drive that ultimately ended in a fourth down play at the goal line that didn't make it, did he get some sort of an indication in the locker room that maybe he's got a problem, maybe he's got an issue, maybe there's going to be a benching in the offing if he doesn't snap out of his funk? And he did, at least for the third quarter. I was very concerned by the lack of urgency from Marcus Mariota and the entire Tennessee offense in the fourth quarter. Down 20-7, half of the quarter to go, trying to drive down the field, too slow to the line of scrimmage, too slow to get the ball snapped. And you know what? If it's the others who are lollygagging and not moving quickly enough, it's on Marcus Mariota to demand that they do what they are expected to do in those moments and get their ass to the line of scrimmage and get ready and get moving, because they have to show a greater sense of urgency when they're down by 2 scores. It's almost like they were conceding, and that's not good enough. And at some point, if this continues, Ryan Tannehill is going to get a chance to show what he can do, because they're going to have to evaluate him and what he brings to the table in making a decision about 2020. once they get to the point, if they get to the point, where they begin to decide that maybe Marcus Mariota is not the long-term answer. Leonard Fournette apparently isn't the long-term answer at running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I thought he was going to be great this year. Sims agreed with me. I got him in both my fantasy teams. Nobody cares. Let me tell you something. I say this hesitantly because it takes a significant amount of courage to put on that uniform and walk onto that field and be out there with the biggest, strongest, fastest athletes that the United States of America has to offer. Now, look, I know you could say, well, basketball players, soccer, but no. The full package, all the different skills. There's no athlete like a professional football player, especially from the standpoint of the violence that can be inflicted upon you when you're out there. So it takes a high degree of courage to just be on the field. With that said, I feel like Leonard Fournette doesn't want to get hit. I feel like he gets the ball, and you ever have those dreams where you're in slow motion and everybody else is moving at normal speed, and no matter what you do, you're like running in mud. I feel like Leonard Fournette, every time he gets the ball, he goes from running in mud to bracing for impact instead of delivering the blow. Now, there was one point last night where he delivered a nice blow, there were flashes. He had the long run near the end of the game, but not enough. It's not sustained. It's not consistent. And he's always been that way. You know, he'd have a big run to pad his stats, but the grinded out process, it's not good enough. And I thought he'd be significantly better this year. He's not. And that's another decision that the Jaguars are going to have to make. Do they keep him for the fourth year of his contract? Remember, there's a pending fight over his guaranteed money, and the Jaguars have attacked it. They've tried to void it. It's subject to an arbitration. It hasn't been resolved yet, but it could make it a lot easier for the Jaguars to move on for Leonard Fournette next year if they decide this guy is simply not getting it done. And based on what we saw last night, even though the Jaguars won, he is not getting it done. And he's a guy that they took in the first round of the 2017 draft with the likes of Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson and Christian McCaffrey on the board. All right, Jaylen Ramsey, a first-round pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who seems to be moving toward the conclusion of his career there. And if I'm the Jaguars, I keep this guy. And even if he's been traded the moment you hear this, it's a mistake for the Jaguars to have traded Jaylen Ramsey. No different than the mistake the Raiders made last year when they traded Khalil Mack. You use those draft picks to get great players. And when you have managed to scratch off a lottery ticket and get a winner, you don't trade the winner in for 2 more lottery tickets. You keep the winner. Now, you got to pay the winner. That's the difference. The jackpot doesn't go to you. The jackpot goes to the player. But you have the benefit of having the great player, and the Jaguars should work this out. And based upon his comments to Nate Burleson from a podcast earlier this week, and those comments emerged not an hour or two before the game last night, I think if they would show up with a giant bag of cash, that would go a long way toward convincing Jaylen Ramsey that they want him. You know, the financial commitment you make to someone says plenty about what you think of them. And unless and until the Jaguars make a gigantic financial commitment to Jaylen Ramsey, he's not going to believe that they want him. So if you want him to think you want him, Jacksonville, pay the man. Shad Khan, the owner of the team, seems to want to keep Jaylen Ramsey. Very easy to do. Write a big check today. It's that simple. Now, if you're going to trade him, this is where this gets fascinating because there haven't been many situations like this where there's an elite player who's available this early in a season while teams are still trying to jockey to figure out where they are and who they're competing with and how they're going to try to get to the playoffs and through the playoffs and to the Super Bowl. And there's value in dangling Jaylen Ramsey now because think of it, if you're the Chiefs, are you going to be more likely to give up what the Jaguars want to keep him away from the Ravens or maybe the Patriots? If you're the Seahawks, do you give up more? Because if you get him, you also keep him away from the Rams or the 49ers if they get involved or other teams you'll be competing with. The Cowboys, right? The Cowboys have to worry about the Eagles getting Jaylen Ramsey. So do the Cowboys figure out a way to get Jaylen Ramsey? And if the cost is 2 first-round picks, if you're confident you're going to be drafting at the bottom of round 1 each of the next 2 years, good. It's like a high second-round pick, and it's a small price to pay. If I were to tell you that you could get Jaylen Ramsey in the draft for a low first-round pick And to ensure that he will be Jaylen Ramsey, you have to give up another low first-round pick. You do it in a heartbeat. Now, the difference is you don't get to benefit from the early years of that first-round pick's contract where he's getting peanuts in comparison to market value. But the whole purpose of the game is to have the best players. And Jaylen Ramsey, if he's available, I could see if the Jaguars play this right and they don't get too greedy, just sit back and let the auction play out. There's going to be one team that gets impulsive. There's going to be one team that gets nervous. There's going to be one team that says, we got to have this guy, in part because we want him, and in part because we don't want one of the teams that will be standing in our way on the path to Miami to get him. Right? The Patriots a couple of weeks ago got receiver Antonio Brown, and the question now becomes, how long will they keep him? I was very troubled by the story that I saw last night from Robert Klemko of SI.com containing the group text messages. That's how warped this guy is, Antonio Brown. He sends intimidating and harassing text messages in a group that apparently included his lawyer. And folks, I've seen some people who have suggested this really wasn't all that harassing. He's talking about how this woman who has accused Antonio Brown unofficially, not to the NFL, not in a civil lawsuit, not to the police, just in a story to Robert Klemko, told the story of Antonio Brown showing up while she was painting a mural at his house wearing nothing but a strategically placed hand towel. And, look, in comparison to the lawsuit that was filed last week, this isn't nearly as troubling. The lawsuit from last week, significant sexual assault, rape, despicable acts if true. This, not in the same ballpark. Still unacceptable. But here's the thing. For Antonio Brown to reach out to this person on a group text that included his own lawyer, for crying out loud, and suggest she's just trying to get money, suggest that she's broke, show a picture of her kids that he took a screenshot of from her Instagram account. This is all aimed at keeping her from transforming the unofficial complaint against Antonio Brown into an official complaint. This is about getting her to let it go and leave him alone and not look for money, and more importantly, not look to go to the league office and spend 10 hours with the league talking about the things Antonio Brown did, like Brittany Taylor did on Monday, only 6 days after she had filed her lawsuit. And it's a weird setting. It's a strange context because, when I practiced law, I would be involved in investigations in a workplace where you've got somebody from one department and somebody from another department, and somebody's making an accusation of misconduct. And it's a given in that setting that the person who is accused of wrongdoing cannot retaliate against the person who is making the accusations or any of the witnesses who may be saying anything that would tend to show that the person who is accused of wrongdoing did it. It's very simple. It's very basic. And when the investigation starts, just to be clear, you would say to the accused, look, have no contact at all with the person who's accusing you of this. Have no contact with any of the witnesses. And if there's any sign of any type of retaliation or harassment, you will be fired on the spot. And in the NFL setting, see, the workplace isn't, the Scranton office park where Dunder Mifflin is on the third floor, wherever they were. The workplace is the whole world because you're subject to the personal conduct policy wherever you are, whenever you are, on the clock, off the clock, in the stadium, out of the stadium, in season, out of season, in the country, out of the country. You're subject to the personal conduct policy. So if there's someone out there who has made it clear that she's got information that would suggest you violated the personal conduct policy, and you begin trying to intimidate her, trying to get her to let it go and not cause a problem for you with your employer, cries out for action. And from the NFL's perspective, they have the power to suspend Antonio Brown. And from the Patriots' perspective, they can cut him anytime they want. And it's correct that the Patriots wouldn't have signed Antonio Brown if they knew about the lawsuit. Nobody would have. Nobody would have. If that lawsuit gets filed on a Monday, there's no way Antonio Brown gets signed on Tuesday. But he got signed on Monday, and the lawsuit showed up on Tuesday. And it would be horrible precedent to fire a guy based simply on the uncorroborated allegations contained in a civil lawsuit, because anyone can file a civil lawsuit. Whatever the filing fee is, $250, $300, $500, I don't know. It's not all that expensive to get a lawsuit started. You can make any allegation you want. Now, your lawyer's going to be subject to potential sanction if it's a frivolous lawsuit, but that provision rarely ever gets applied. People can sue for anything they want, whenever they want, and then it's up to the court system to decide what to do with it. So you can't fire somebody based simply on that. But when you start to see these other incidents, specifically an act of intimidation and harassment directed at somebody who would be inclined to potentially make a formal claim of misconduct against Antonio Brown, that's when it becomes a problem. That's when you have enough if you're the Patriots. It's more than just saying, well, we can't fire the guy based on a civil lawsuit. Now you've got this smoking gun of intimidation and harassment. And look, there's other stuff out there we may not know about. I've said all week, 10 hours, Brittany Taylor with the NFL. What did she say? How persuasive was she? How much of that did the Patriots know about? What kind of investigation have the Patriots been doing on their own? If I'm Robert Kraft, I want to know what I'm dealing with. I want to know who this guy is. He's been accused in a civil action. That's not enough to take action against him, but it's enough to put me on notice that I should use some of my resources to figure out exactly who I'm dealing with. Because if this goes sideways, it's going to reflect poorly on the Patriots. And yes, they're at a point now where they may have to write off $9 million. But the $9 million that they give up in moving on from Antonio Brown could pale in comparison to the damage that keeping him could do to their brand. So, look, it's now 10:06 a.m. Eastern as I say these words. I won't be surprised if he's on the commissioner exempt list by the end of the day, and I won't be surprised if the Patriots cut him by the end of the day. That's how alarming these intimidating and harassing text messages are to me. We'll see if the Patriots agree. We'll see if the league agrees. And we'll see you next week for PFT Live and PFT OT. Enjoy the Week 3 games, and we'll talk to you soon.